Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Ramchaiva Narottama Devim Saraswati Vyasa Tadojaya Mudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Naishiki.
We do verses 25 to 31. So, y'all remember where we were at? What's going on? Long time.
So Swami is about to appear, and Maharaj Parishit is offering respects to the sages.
So Maharaj Parishit is setting up the thanks to the Ganges, and he's ready for instructions, and that's when Shukadeva Swami arrives. And not just that, but he's there, and then there's an assembly of he's there, and there's a lot of assembly of sages actually. The money is there, Vasudev is there, and yes, all other sages. But and then there are also sages from different schools of thought. It's not just Persianists. There's also impersonalists, but they're all waiting for Shukadeva Swami. And so that's this point, Shukadeva Swami arrives. So it's still translations from 25 to 31.
At that moment, there appeared the powerful son of Vyasadeva, who traveled over the earth disinterested and satisfied with himself. He did not manifest any symptoms of belonging to any social order or status of life. He was surrounded with women and children, and he dressed as if others had neglected him.
The son of Vyasadeva was only 16 years old. His legs, hands, thighs, arms, shoulders, forehead, and the other parts of his body were all delicately formed. His eyes were beautifully wide, and his nose and ears were highly raised. He had a very attractive face, and his neck was well formed and beautiful like a conch. His collarbone was fleshy, his chest broad and thick, his navel deep, and his abdomen beautifully striped. His arms were long and curly hair that was strewn over his beautiful face. He was naked, and the hue of his body reflected that of Lord Krishna. He was blackish and very beautiful due to his youth. Because of the glamour of his body and his attractive smiles, he was pleasing to women. Though he tried to cover his natural glories, the great sages present there were all experts in the art of the physiognomy. And so they honored him by rising from their seats.
He is also known as Sagara, one who was always protected by Krishna. Now his head to at that time.
Sruti Goswami said, surrounded by saintly sages and demigods, just as the moon is surrounded by stars, planets, and other heavenly bodies. His presence is gorgeous, and he was respected by all.
The sage, Sri Sukadeva Goswami, sat perfectly pacified, intelligent and ready to answer any question without hesitation. The great devotee Maharaj Parikshit approached him, offered his respects by bowing before him, and politely inquired sweet words and told him.
I was off today, so something chance. But Tatra bhavat Bhagwan Vyasaputro
Bhagavan Vyasaputro
Yadrichaya Kamati
Yadrichaya Atmano Napekshaha
Alakshalingo Nijalabhatushto
Alakshalingo Nijalabhatushto
Yatascha Baler Avaduta Vesha
Vidashchalera Avaduta Vesha
Tatra bhavat Bhagwan Vyasaputro
Bhagavan Vyasaputro
Yadrichaya Kamatma Atmanapeksha
Yadrichaya Atmano Napeksha
Alakshalingo Nijalabhatushto
Alakshalingo Nijalabhatushto
Yatascha Baler Avaduta Vesha
Vidashchalera Avaduta Vesha
Tatra bhavat Bhagwan Vyasaputro
Bhagavan Vyasaputro
Yadrichaya Kamatmanapeksha
Yadrichaya Atmano Napeksha
Alakshalingo Nijalabhatushto
Alakshalingo Nijalabhatushto
Yatascha Baler Avaduta Vesha
Vidashchalera Avaduta Vesha
Let's do one person. Tatra bhavat Bhagwan Vyasaputro Yadrichaya Kamatmanapeksha
Alakshalingo Nijalabhatushto Vidashchalera Avaduta Vesha
Tatra bhavat Bhagwan
Vyasaputro
Yadrichaya Kamatmanapeksha Alakshalingo Nijalabhatushto Vitascha Baler Avaduta Vesha Tatra bhavat Bhagwan Vyasaputro Yadrichaya Kamatmanapeksha Alakshalingo Nijalabhatushto Vitascha Baler Avaduta Vesha Tatra there Abhavat here Bhagavan powerful Vyasaputra son of Vyasadeva Yadrichaya is one desires Ram to earth Atmana while traveling Anapeksha is interested Alakshaya unmanifested Linga symptoms Nijalabha self-realized Tushta satisfied Vrita surrounded Cha and Bali by children Avaduta neglected by others Vesha dressed. At that moment, there appeared the powerful son of Vyasadeva. The child of the earth is interested and satisfied with himself. He did not
manifest any symptoms of belonging to any social
order
or status of life. He was surrounded with women and children, and he dressed as if others had neglected him.
The word Bhagavan is sometimes used in relation with some of the great devotees of the Lord, like Shukadeva Goswami. Such liberated souls are disinterested in the affairs of this material world because they are self-satisfied by the great achievements of devotional service. As explained before, Shukadeva Goswami never accepted any formal spiritual master, nor did he undergo any formal reformatory performances. His father, Vyasadeva, was his natural spiritual master because Shukadeva Goswami heard Srimad Bhagavatam. After this, he became completely self-satisfied. Thus, he was not dependent on any formal process. The formal processes are necessary for those who are expected to reach the stage of complete liberation, but Sri Shukadeva Goswami was already in that status by the grace of his father. As a young boy, he was expected to be properly dressed, but he went about naked and was uninterested in social customs. He was neglected by the general populace, and inquisitive boys and women surrounded him as if he were a madman. He thus appears on the scene while traveling on the earth of his own accord. It appears that upon the inquiry of Maharaj Parikshit, the great sages were not unanimous in their decision as to what was to be done. For spiritual salvation, there were many prescriptions according to the different modes of different persons. But the ultimate aim of life is to attain the highest perfectional stage of devotional service to the Lord. As doctors differ, so also sages differ in their different prescriptions. While such things were going on, the great and powerful son of Vyasadeva appeared on the scene.
Yeah, Shukadeva Goswami, he was in the womb of his mother for a whole 16 years. So that was quite uncomfortable. And Vyasadeva, he was something come out. So at that point, yeah, at the age of 16, Shukadeva Goswami came out and just walked away. He was already a teenager, so he was like, all right, I'm done with this. So I starts walking away. His father's chasing him, Vyasadeva is chasing him. And the thing is, Shukadeva Goswami is that he's already liberated. He already knew what Brahman was. So he was already aware of spirit, soul, God's body, and of course he's the incarnation of God. But he was at that point, at one point he was technically the person. And then later, there's different versions, but then Vyasadeva sent one of his disciples, and they were out there. Shukadeva Goswami was out there, and he heard Srimad Bhagavatam, some of the pastimes of Krishna. And at that point, he realized actually that Krishna is supreme personality of God, and love for Krishna. And I believe even when he was born, that's when also Vyasadeva said 2 verses, and that's when he actually came out. So yeah, Shukadeva Goswami he was self-realized, and he would walk and he would go to different Vyasa's houses, but he wouldn't stay much longer than the time for milking the cow. So he would stay there, milk the cow, would give him some offerings, and he would just go and leave. And many times, as in these verses, you can see that people would not recognize who he is. And so there were little sticks, little boys, kids running around with sticks in their hands and throwing stones or whatever at him. And it's like it's like a scene in the village in India. How many of you have been to Vrindavan or India? And so you can so when you go in India and Vrindavan, there's always in Vrindavan little kids, right? They start chasing you. I don't know what they say. Chapati. They're asking which are really? Who's that? Is that correct? Is that okay? You heard chapatis. Money, yeah, pesa. Was it chocolate? So, have chocolate. So he's a little Brajvasi kid, you know. They start chasing you and asking for little things. And then, so yeah, because Shukdev Goswami also was walking and preaching everywhere, but he looked externally he looked like he was totally aloof from this world. He just looked like he looked like like to the untrained eye, he looked like you know, and just walking naked. That didn't help. So they were like, oh, this naked person walking on the street, let's chase them around. But internally, you self-realized, so he didn't bother with any formalities of this world. So, family would stick around and place for too long. So yeah, something not to be copied. But he was doing it for the self-realized. And so yeah, people were just curious, and some people, it's like the village folks who just kind of chasing him around. And then finally, Shri Goswami arrives at the scene where all these sages are. And if you just picture it, this assembly of sages, as I mentioned a few names before, Narada Muni was there, Asita was there, and so forth, other sages also. And it's an August assembly. All these sages who actually mentioned in different parts of the Bhagavatam. They were also given instructions, Asita and Narada and Krishna. But they were waiting because they knew that it was the time for Shukadeva Goswami to come and explain, speak about the Krishna and giving instructions. So they knew that they were waiting. And as the verse mentions, there are other sages also, different schools of thought, and there's just some different prescriptions that they could be giving. And that also often happens because in the Vedic tradition, there's different schools of thought. So they give prescription based on what school of thought they are, what they have practiced. And you see that amongst the devotee community also. At one point I realized that whenever I would seek some career advice from different devotees, they would either advise me to do the career they did, or they would advise me to do the career that they wanted to do. I just noticed it at some point, like, oh yes, they wanted to do this, and that's what they're giving me now. And so there'll always be different advice from devotees, but it should always line with three things. But it should line up with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastras. The Guru is the spiritual master, and instruction of the spiritual master. For us, all of those things, and then of course the scriptures, for us, all the scriptures to come from Prabhupada, the commentaries of Prabhupada and Prabhupada. So Guru, and Sadhu, alternative general Sadhu. It's all the devotees word. So those three things should line up if there's some kind of instruction. And normally, if you hear something from your devotee, they don't three things. And but it's good to always consult one's spiritual master and see, as long as it's nothing dramatic or drastic, it normally lines up with those three things. But yeah, it should line up with those Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So anything that you hear anywhere, you should just kind of think about it, like, okay, does it line up? And if it doesn't, then you want to revisit it, you want to question it, and so forth. But small things like don't reach out. So all those little things. Yeah, you can see there's a line of the Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, moving through. Probably reach out. But yeah, and Sadhu and Shastra, yeah, is it there in the Shastra which works? It's the Guru. But yeah, so it should always line up with these three things. Because oftentimes, Prabhupada, especially the letters from Prabhupada and conversations, there's so many things Prabhupada says in letters to specific devotees and conversations to he talks to specific devotees. And so you don't want to take one little thing that Prabhupada said to one person in 1972 on June 29th, or whatever, and then be like, oh my God, Prabhupada said this, and we must do this for eternity. It's like, well, maybe there was some context to it, and maybe it doesn't quite always line up with Sadhu and Shastra all the time. It might not actually, because there's always time, place, and circumstance. And so we want to be careful, and that's why there's a few hermeneutics. where there's verses, even the verses in the Bhagavatam, there's always in a certain context. So we don't want to take things totally out of context. At the same time, we don't want to just be like, well, it doesn't really mean anything. So that's the other extreme. And the other extreme is you take one thing totally out of context and try to apply that in every scenario, every person. It's basically the fanatic. One funny story, there's this devotee, she was the pujari for Radha Chandji in Dallas. And when they had just gotten the beauty of Krishna Chandji, and they were with eyes on him. And at that point, Prabhupada told them, but then somehow the other, I think Prabhupada later told them it's all right if it's so small. And then she found out, and she was like, oh no, Prabhupada said make them big. And then she went up to Prabhupada, and she said, Prabhupada, you said to make it big, but the eyes they made it smaller. And Prabhupada said, it's all right, it's okay. Either he told them later, or maybe he didn't tell them later, or he just said it's okay, it's small. Either one of those cases. And she said, but Prabhupada, he was quoting Prabhupada to Prabhupada. But Prabhupada said, make the eyes big. It's pretty funny. And then Prabhupada was like, yes, and I'm saying it is okay. So yeah, I don't know if there's anyone else that recorded from. But yeah, so we don't want to be walking around with Prabhupada says all the time. We want to be able to analyze the Shastra, analyze how it could apply to our lives based on Guru Sadhana Shastra. So, Parikshit Maharaj was here, and this is the culmination of the Mahabharata. Mahabharata is this intense story of this family that had a cycle war, and there was so much intrigue, and the Kauravas trying to pick up Pandavas, and there were so many dramatic scenes where people were killed, heads were chopped off, and chests were broken apart, and arms were torn off. And so after all that, Yudhishthira Maharaj, and then after some time, he retired, and Parikshit Maharaj was king, and then now he's retiring because of the whole thing that happened with Shankarishi about Parikshit. And so, this material world is always full of so many dramatic things, and our lives are a little less dramatic than but of course, for us, it's always as dramatic as the Mahabharata. My armor was whatever, and I'm gonna take revenge, and I'm gonna kill him this way now. Of course, it's not as dramatic as the Mahabharata. So all this dramatic stuff happened, but in the end, what it all boiled down to was Parikshit Maharaj listening to instructions by Sri Goswami, and that really is the essence of the human form of life. Despite the various dramas that happen in one's lives, the crux of it is like, can we actually find a spiritual master? Can we get spiritual instructions from the spiritual master and be able to apply it in our lives? And so when we pray to Krishna and we say that Krishna gives you Guru, and Guru gives you Krishna. And so Krishna sends the spiritual master to the sincere seeker. And Parikshit Maharaj, he was managing the kingdom for a while, and now he was at a stage where he was totally ready for instructions. And so when he was ready, when the listener is ready, when the disciple is ready, the Guru naturally appears. It's not a question of I have to go find my Guru and go on this whole search. And the one just has to be sincere in Krishna consciousness and just have the desire of Krishna. And we were talking about it. Actually, it was interesting. Ganeshankar was talking with me and this other group, and Ganeshankar was sharing about free will. And the point he was making was that we, as human beings, we actually still, animals have hardly any free will. But as human beings, we have very, very minute free will. There's only some, most of the things we do are based on, you know, anyone can control by 3 modes.
Have control over it?
No, our control. You have control over it, Bruce?
No, everybody, I thought you said.
Yeah, anyone here controlled by the 3 modes?
Everybody.
So yeah, they're all, what you say?
And then I saw everybody raise their hand.
Yeah, except you, Bruce, what's going on? So yeah, we're all controlled by the 3 modes, you know, at different degrees, and even in the 3 modes, we're controlled by, you know, more, some days more by ignorance, some days more by passion, some days more by goodness, and all this. They all 3 of them always fight amongst each other. You can almost never be in one mode for our entire life. And this kind of keeps cycling, even in the day, you know. When you go to bed, it's ignorance. When you wake up, it's what goodness, and then during the day when you work, it's more passion. So it's always like that. And so the modes. What were we talking about before that? Was that group? Oh yeah, free will. So it's like, yeah, we have a little bit of free will, and it's not much we can really apply it in. But the main thing we can choose is really, you know, are we gonna turn towards Krishna, or are we not going to turn towards Krishna? And so that's the little, you know, little turn that we can make. And so when we turn towards Krishna, and we do that by, you know, by doing sadhana bhakti, by, you know, by associating with devotee, the 9 process of devotional service, that's our basic free will, really. And when we do that, then Krishna's like, it's the scale, it's the spiritual master. And yes, so we want to be careful how we go about the process of finding a spiritual master. We don't want to just, you know, the first sage we see who's smiling, like, God, he's smiling at me. So, you know, that's it. That's the spiritual master. We really want to see, okay, what kind of a person is this? What instructions do they give? How do they live their life, and so forth? And do I feel inspired? That's one thing that happens. The devotee, the disciple feels inspired to follow the instructions, and it feels inspired to practice Krishna consciousness. And that is very important, actually. The disciple has to be very sure that they will be, that, you know, it's a lifelong, it's not lifelong, life's long. You actually have to be able to apply those instructions to the spiritual master, because the spiritual master is not an ordinary person. You know, in the Bhagavatam, we see how with untrained eye, Srila Goswami was just another guy, just another brahmachari, and walking on the street and naked, and they just, you know, just falling behind him. But then when he became the same son, as what was the word physiognomy? Like the study of the. Can anyone look up physiognomy? What it means? So the Sanskrit is lakshana. Yeah. So lakshana is the characteristics. So they're knowledgeable of based on how the different parts of the body, you know, what it reflects, what it means, and then you'll see it in the Bhagavatam, different great personalities. It says how. And in the CC2 for Lachitanya, it explains how the arms are so long. Person's facial features and expression, especially when regarded as indicative of character or ethnic origin. So yeah, in this case, it's like indicative of character. And so yeah, so one, and of course there's people who actually lose faces and all that. But the sages were trained in it, so when they saw, they could tell this is a great personality just by how his body was, how he was walking, and so forth. And so for the disciple also, one has to first study in 26th Avenue, actually. You know, Prabhupada was there. He was not only spiritual master in town, in the whole country, you know, only Gaudiya Vaishnava spiritual master in the entire country, and only devotee of Krishna in the entire country. And these few people were coming to learn from him. And somebody asked, how do you know who is a spiritual master? And so Prabhupada basically said, well, I have to tell you. So since he was the only spiritual master, he had to explain that this is what the spiritual master is. And of course, he was the only spiritual master around at the time. And so he said, he said, you learn from the Bhagavad Gita, you see, how the characteristic, again, the translations, we wrote the translation. So, and that was his task. He had to basically explain everything. And now we are fortunate to have instructions. We have the Prabhupada's books, we have his disciples of, experienced spiritual life for half a decade, or more. And so we have a wealth of association of Prabhupada and his disciples and his followers. And so that is our good fortune. And so, so one can actually, really study the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita to see, okay, what are some features of so, and do I feel inspired by this person? Will I be following, the instructions of this person and so forth? And because it's not a light thing, actually, it's a commitment. It's a lifelong commitment. And once you made that commitment, there's that wow, there's that contract that you signed with the spiritual master. And so the spiritual master is not to be seen as an ordinary person. And so actually there was something that it's not seen as an ordinary person for the trained eye. And so right away when he came, he sat down, and Krishna Maharaj was ready to ask him questions. And all the sages were like, okay, now he's going to start Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is now, of course, this was all Srimad Bhagavatam, but this is the scene that is set in the Bhagavatam, right? Krishna Maharaj and Srila Goswami with the verse. So Bhagavatam is a conversation within the conversation within the conversation. But this is the main conversation for the Bhagavatam, where Krishna Maharaj and Srila Goswami are speaking, and he's going to ask a lot of questions. And before Srila Goswami released here, there was a scene in the Bhagavatam where Vasudeva was chasing his son, and his son was, completely walking. And he walked by this river bank, and there was this woman who were bathing. And when he walked by, bathing. And when Vasudeva came by, they started covering themselves. And Vasudeva was like, my 16-year-old son just passed by, and we were bothered with him. Vasudeva, father of Vedas. I don't think he said quite like that. The true incarnation here of Krishna. And they said that no, you associate with what varna you are, what ashram you are in, and so forth. So you associate with all that, but your son is beyond varna's ashram, beyond bodily designations and so forth. And so they make that point. And Srila son was beyond all that. And he was. It's described that he was actually. So Shukra means parent. And so Shukra was Radharani's parent, and he was always there to hear all these pastimes and see all the pastimes of Radha Krishna. And so then he came and Shukra was son to share all that. And the entire Bhagavatam, it does not refer to Radharani. I think maybe once there was a quote on Radha. It's done quarterly. And the entire Bhagavatam, her name is actually. It doesn't say it. And the reason it doesn't say it is because if he starts talking about Radharani, he's just going to go on ecstasy. Right? So actually doesn't talk about her directly. But of course, in the Krishna book, when we read about there's all these parts of Radha Krishna and so forth. So that's Shukadeva Goswami. So the parrot, so it's describing the Bhagavatam, and the parrot nibbles on a fruit. I've never done that actually. Eaten a fruit that has been nibbled by a bird. Is it actually sweeter? I've heard. Has anyone experienced it? But at least philosophically, in terms of the philosophy, when sugar, the fruit of the juice of the Bhagavatam, and then passes it on to the next acharya, it only gets sweeter. The philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And it's passed down from spiritual master to spiritual master, it only gets sweeter. And you can see that this way because just think about Prabhupada. Prabhupada came here and presented his books and he made disciples, and then his disciples they have such nice cherished memories of Prabhupada and be able to hear that. There will be the generation who will be able to tell the next few generations I met somebody who met Srila Prabhupada. You know? So we are that generation. And then for the Prabhupada disciples, the Prabhupada disciples. So everybody, each generation, even though as it goes further, and then they'll say, we met somebody who met somebody who met Prabhupada. So, but each generation, as they follow Prabhupada's instructions, as you know, each generation will have there will be some beauty of the Gaudiya Vaishnava lineage that they will cherish. There'll always be something, and that's the beauty of the disciple succession. That the instructions of the spiritual masters always continue, and each generation of spiritual masters have their own contributions that they made in preaching. And so Prabhupada, of course, on his contribution, his disciples did too, the prime disciples to make those contributions now. So the Gaudiya Vaishnava lineage can continue if we are able to follow the founder of Acharya Srila Prabhupada. And just really learn about not just his books, but about his life also. Because like here we see there's the book Bhagavad, there's the person Bhagavad. So it's not just, we learn all the instructions, we learn all, what you do, all the rules and regulations, but we actually have to really imbibe the character of the previous acharyas, especially the founder acharya. And so for us, that's actually what really, really brings out Krishna consciousness. When we really imbibe the really mature. And then be able to implement those instructions that they've given. So at this point, Keshavita Goswami is going to start speaking. Any thoughts or comments so far? Question. We talked about it before. What else do you notice when you say you're looking for a spiritual master, or you just when you see any senior devotees? What are some things that pop up to you? What are some characteristics that you see? Beautiful. Things that stand out.
Doing the needful.
He's ready to be first. They have a nice service attitude.
Listening to you with care.
Listen to what?
Listening to you with care.
Listen to you with care. Yeah. Prabhupada did that often too. The Williams would often say that Prabhupada is someone's going on, but they would talk with Prabhupada is someone like
There's a sincere humility. It's not just, you can tell it's not just something you're putting on, you can really feel the depth of how
it's not the, sometimes when with good intent devotees study some strategies or whatever, different things. And then they apply it, and it's like, okay, you're trying hard. Okay. But when we really practice this Krishna consciousness for a long time, and so forth, we get a sincere. Yeah, or if you just think of your own spiritual monsters.
Only talking about Krishna. We always talk about Krishna. We don't talk about anything else.
Yeah, that's a big one. One time, Jayadeva Bharat used to visit us more several years ago. He was staying here. My brother, say what he would always take care of him, and cook and stuff, and on the night and stuff like that. It's anything but a And so one time he was massaging Marge, and Marge fell asleep, and Marge started reciting verses in his sleep. I think he was even doing the samsara prayers before. And even with Marge, oh yeah, he was the party sleep actually. Always think.
This is on what you were talking about earlier. Just how all the sages just knew to be there. And I don't know, it's just a really interesting thing to me because it was really quick. Like Rick went back, left his kingdom, and was at the country. They probably traveled long distances.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of cities are mystic cities too. Yeah, once they found out, wait for it. And they'll appear. It's funny, last night I had a dream of trying to get to a festival in Shanghai. Last minute. But the cities didn't have to do that. They didn't have to get a flight, they would never sure I had. Due to mystic powers, they able to get it and flight with this princess. Darn it, I missed this festival. Oh yeah, they didn't have to do that. They just were able to appear. And then now actually they're doing new ones for the road. About they have these festivals, Kumbh Mela, which is the confluence of three rivers, Ganga, Saraswati, and three sacred rivers. Which one? Oh, Yamuna. Oh, yeah. Yamuna. So the idea is that you have this confluence at a certain time you go there and take and so many sages actually come. And I think it was Robert Morris. And he said that they have mystic powers because they're up in the Himalayan mountains, and they're able to actually float down the river. Not like swimming. Because they appear as souls kind of floats down, and then they come out of the water. Then they just come out of the water. So they're there for the like the thing I was talking about. It's there's a lot of mystic powers. The talks on what are some things from practices that stand out based on scriptural experience when you see a new person. From online views.
50% hold. Actually, this is a very good question because I've always struggled to analyze, reflect on myself. How do I know my spiritual master is a pure devotee? The answer is I don't know. And then if you think about it, but every time I'm next to my spiritual master, there's no doubt about the fact that he's the right person to follow. It's just a weird thing. For me, I still cannot comprehend. So I'm very glad that today I'm learning something. But I think that's like one characteristic I always felt. I've heard others also say the same, is that when you're in the presence of a pure devotee or an Uttama Adhikari, you automatically start to chant Maha Mantra. Like you're just inspired to chant, even though they didn't even say anything. And I see that so many times, like Gurudev would just be there, and then people would, get so excited, and then they're getting interested in what spiritual consciousness, and just by the sheer presence of somebody. So for me, that's always been very powerful, and it's inexplicable.
Yeah, that's also there in the Tibetan that explains that. Yeah, there's different effects of a great devotee. One when they chant, and everyone else feels inspired to chant, but also there's that when they're just present, people feel inspired to chant Krishna. Something of the devotees that service and relation to Krishna. So it's yeah, and the nectar devotional talks to that effect that they don't waste any time. It's always all the time that they have in Krishna service, and everything's the time. It's that kind of service. And so there's actually I think it's an 18th practice this. But that was one that stood out to me. There's all this thing. So when Prabhupada came, there were all these people who were sharing spiritual knowledge and that. But with Prabhupada, he was so genuine. and it was just there showing Krishna consciousness. And those who were genuine are able to see that. Yeah, they're able to see that also because when they started applying his teachings, so that if they started applying his teachings, then they actually felt the difference. They actually saw that they were happier. Consciousness.
What about qualifications? Spiritual master to be a magician. So about the magician came to Prabhupada, started showing tricks and things would disappear and appear. Prabhupada said, well, that's all right, but can you make that disappear? Magician told us that's a no. Prabhupada said, okay.
That's funny. Actually, I've never heard that right. Yeah, to make that disappear. And there was another one. There was a politician who was, like Prabhupada a lot. And then, so he came up to Prabhupada one day and he said, "Oh, Prabhupada, there's this mystic who came and he can just make an apple appear out of thin air." And Prabhupada said, "Okay." And, he said that I went to the West with hardly any money, 40 rupees. And hardly any money. And he said, now we have so many temples in all over the world. And in each temple, there's so many of my disciples. And they all do service without any pay. And in each of those temples, they have so many apples. So he said, who's the greater mystic? He said, oh, you're bro. So yeah, probably very good. Yeah. And then the last point with the spiritual master, or even just advanced devotees, they, as one progresses more in spiritual life, they're more and more in touch with the super soul. And so oftentimes the super soul guides the spiritual master to say certain things. Or this is what I was going through or something. There was this one time, it was actually Krishna, it was a long time ago, I wasn't here then. There was a bhakta at the ashram, and he had shared with the town president and Sachi that he was struggling with a few things. And then the next day in the Bhagavatam class, the devotee, and he was class, and he gave class, and he touched on those struggles. And this bhakta freaked out. He went to the town president and said, "You broke my confidence, why did you tell him?" And he's like, "I didn't tell him anything." He just touched on it. So it's like, when the devotees, the super soul inspires, especially spiritual masters. And so sometimes it looks like the spiritual master can read your mind. And it is true, it can read your mind because the super soul is guiding them. It gives them instructions to guide you. So Shri Swami is going to speak. The question is going to ask about questions tomorrow, I believe. And then we'll start the second canto with Shri Swami. Shri Swami goes out, he goes all out right in the second canto. He's really very instructions actually. And here he is instructing a king. And so he goes, why do you need a pillow? You see your arms, the pillow. And there's other words like that. That's in the second half. So, but tomorrow I'm not going to speak on it. So it's about the second half. All right, anything else? Interested about Kanki? Yeah. Kanki? Yeah.
Krishna Bala Joy Moy, Hari Bala Jiva Joy, Swaha Prasada Tila Vai, Sayamrita Radha Krishna Gunaga, Preme Gato Chaitanya Nitai, Jani Mai, Jani Tai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,